Hi, my name is Jennifer.
And I'm Rebecca.
And we are the curriculum developers for Daily Wonder. Daily Wonder is a home learning hub that creates guided curriculum for parents so they can homeschool with confidence. And we have this lovely Facebook community that is really supportive, and we see a lot of questions and comments that come up, and we wanted to find out what's, kind of burning questions parents have at this time of year, or really any time of year throughout the school year. How can we help with passing on some of our own experience? So the topics that have come up are burnout, what happens when you experience burnout as a parent or also as a child, intrinsic motivation for learning, screen time, questions around boundaries with that, atypical learners and how to support, signs of overwhelm in kids, how you can tell what the signs are, and then how children's behavior might change with the seasons. So we are going to start with the hot topic of burnout. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was a big topic for quite a number of parents who mentioned that they're starting to feel like this it might be related to season, but there's this sense of burnout and kids are resistant and parents are resistant. So what kind of ideas do we have for this time?
So I remember burnout, really intensely at different times of year, like if you got sick or if you had a lot of stress at home, or if you just start to maybe feel like lack of willpower, like you don't have the same strength of will forces to hold the routine and the rhythm. So when you start to feel that burnout, it's kind of concerning because you think, are we going to lose all the hard work we've done? So we just wanted to put together some ideas of how you could practically change your daily homeschool routine, and then also look at ways that you might support your own inner life to get reset. So one of the ideas we had was, you could add in more time for your children to be doing handwork or woodwork or baking, things that are more hands-on, because once you set it up, you can take a bit of a step back, and kids, typically their will gets really engaged easily in those types of projects. And so that's one way to kind of be able to take a breath during the day.
Mm-hmm. And some of those practical sort of changes and updates you can make for this season where things start to be in a slump is you can add more movement activities, whatever your child is interested in, whether that's creating obstacle courses or following a movement program online or a class or something like that, adding in some new music, taking up sort of folk dancing in your living room or whatever it is to build in the music. Maybe you go outside and you start an obstacle course outside or something to kind of build and start the day that way.
Mm-hmm. I know it's written into our one of our grade 5 units that yoga comes in the morning, but there's no reason why you might not want to add that for 20 minutes as your morning movement if that supports your child as well.
Right.
Another beautiful thing we used to love to do as teachers is called like an artist free rendering. So let's say once or twice a week after you've done a lot of content for a main lesson and your child has a lot of inspiration, you might just put out like a bunch of different crafting materials and crayons and scissors and glue and say, you create your own art piece about such and such topic. And then that gives you possibly an hour where they're really getting into their own work again.
Mm-hmm. It's these subtle changes that can make a difference for your children to kind of enliven and uplift them out of something that might have become a little bit routine. Mm-hmm. We were also thinking about how parents sometimes can start to feel this burnout too. And sometimes they play off of each other, the children's burnout and the parents' burnout. So we thought, it's important that parents somehow switch it up for themselves and re-engage and make things authentic for themselves. One way to do that is through meditation or, some kind of mindfulness programming or some sort of, at the end of the day, just a contemplation on a reflection of your day. And there's lots of different ways to do that. Yeah,
because it's really important to point out that when you are working with children at this stage as the parent and the teacher, children require, like the holding forces of the adult, which really are like their life forces. So need to be kind of contained. And so you're using a lot of your own life forces, which might be called chi or prana, and that's legitimately, being lost in you unless you have a good practice of how to build that back up. So burnout is legitimately happening if you don't find a source to bring it back in. And then we were saying also to reestablish heart connection, like the Daily Wonder material is really meant to be delivered to a child through the parent who's excited and engaged. So if you're feeling kind of tired about the material, then you might need to do a little bit more prep, a little bit more digging into the background of a topic so that you feel you've found a point of entry where you're just so excited to share that with your child, because that changes everything.
Mm-hmm. So those are some ideas to address that burnout. And there's different types of things that might be at play. And we'll talk about some of those as well as we go further along. But that's kind of some thoughts around that topic. Mm-hmm. And our next topic is, it's related. It's that intrinsic motivation for learning. There's that extrinsic motivation, might be something like getting a good grade or getting to use the iPad at the end of the morning lesson. The intrinsic is this inner motivation that comes with this desire to learn, this desire to know more. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty obvious in our society that it's the will forces, the ability to persevere and like carry through on a task mm-hmm. that's the most challenging for children today. And I think we can probably, like, even just on the surface, assume like we just have a fast-paced society, everything comes quickly, it's instant gratification. So the idea of having to like slow down and persevere isn't mm-hmm. easily, it's not a skill we easily gather in this day and age, but Daily Wonder's foundation has a huge focus on building will forces. So when you say, why doesn't my child like intrinsically just feel motivated to learn, we kind of want to look at the will forces. And I think that ties in with this question of like external reward systems, which are very common again in our society. But our experience is that if you give them that dangling carrot of like, when you do this, this is going to happen, sometimes they just rush even quicker through this to get that. And, mm-hmm. and so you're not getting them to sink into the depth of the experience they could have if they were really like working with clay and creating a sculpture or drawing this picture to the best of their ability. They're like, oh, if I get this picture done, I get my iPad or something. So mm-hmm. I think I would deeply like sit with some of those questions of how am I using it? Am I using a reward system? And just being honest if it's mm-hmm. working the way you want it to.
And a couple of things are at play, really. The start of working with intrinsic motivation is to deal with the burnout. To really authentically connect with the theme of the curriculum is going to help build a self-interest in the subject matter. Another thing Jen and I were talking about in preparation was this idea of setting the bar really low. So thinking about a small aspect of the lesson that you want your child to complete. Jen used the example of building something out of clay. So 10 minutes of clay work, and that at the end of setting the expectation up beforehand, and then at the end of that, sufficient praise and acknowledgement that this is a job that's really well done, so that your child has this experience of feeling good about something that was where the bar was really low. And so they want that sense of, the chemicals that come with feeling good. They want to have that, you want to build up on that so that they start to have a feeling for those good feelings that come with accomplishment and drive and things associated with motivation.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to like further this idea of positive feedback and praise, we really stand by the nurtured heart approach. Mm-hmm. So, our culture again is the good job culture, but it's a bit flat because children want to know why what they did was good. It's not just because good job just becomes a bit meaningless. So when you are offering your child feedback, it's like, I love how I saw you, dedicate this time to this work. It shows me how much you're learning about perseverance, or I appreciate how you created this sculpture because I can see that you were really paying attention to the details in the story that, just giving reasons why it was a good job is what's meaningful. Mm-hmm.
Those specific things. Another idea is about taking breaks. Sometimes we get, as adults, really into the flow of a morning lesson and we consider it a certain amount of time and we just want to get it done and we want our children to be engaged and love it, that we forget that at certain times of the year, we need to give breaks, and we call them brain breaks, but it might look like up from the table, 10 jumping jacks, or it might look like a walk in the forest, depending on your child's needs. But those little breaks can give space to, attach to the content when you are present. They can be pretty powerful.
And it kind of ties in with another idea we had around if you do have to set the bar low in order, let's say your child has to write a paragraph of writing and they're really resistant to it, but you want them to find like the inner joy of this sense of accomplishment, and you break it down into, okay, we're going to sit down and write one sentence. And then the reward isn't, the reward is something healthy. Like, what would you like to do for your break? If your child has a lot of energy and they want to do 20 jumping jacks, or they want to, play hide and seek in the house for 5 minutes, or they want to whatever, I'm sure you can think of many things. We thought, well, you could write out 10 great ideas that would give them this body break, excitement of getting up from the table and running around, and, put them on pieces of paper in a little basket. And when they need that break, they get to pick one out of the hat and go and do that thing. Maybe they get to play with Lego for 10 minutes. It just kind of depends. Your child, like if they would get too absorbed in that and you couldn't pull them out, it's not the right activity, but something quick and easy. I think setting the bar low, also with intrinsic motivation, sometimes children don't want to, like they're so resistant to doing it because it is so fatiguing for them and beyond what we could imagine. So writing, as an example, is a good way of just seeing how you've got to set the bar low also for what they might be able to achieve on any particular day.
I just had a thought I'm going to add, which is about motivation, where, this idea of extrinsic motivation is often based on our sense that we are the accomplishment, or if I get this done, then I am better, where intrinsic motivation is more like I am a learner. So everything is exciting. I'm curious about everything. Everything's about the journey and the process of learning. So it doesn't have this kind of completion. It's this ongoing process and engagement in learning. And that's kind of what we're aiming for. Yeah. Anything else to say on that topic?
No, I think it's like, I guess just that, as a parent, your child the best. And this could tie back into our burnout and meditative life. But we often find, you can sit with a question like, I don't know why I don't know how to make sure that they find this deep love of learning. That can be a question that you actually live with for weeks or months. And you just carry it like before you go to sleep at night. I want to be inspired to figure out how to inspire my child, or these are things that can live into your life, and signs and direction can come over weeks or months. So it's not always a quick fix by any means. You have to be kind of comfortable to be uncomfortable.
That's a good one. Yeah. Our next topic, screen time.
Screen time, another hot topic.
Yeah. So here you are, just get comfortable while you watch your screen and listen to us tell you about screen time.
About how you should get off your screen.
Yeah, this is a hot topic for parents because kids are often motivated by their screen time. So they know they need to get through a certain component of their learning so that they get their screen time. And I know that a lot of parents try to incorporate screen time into learning, but there's something so exciting about it. And a lot of studies will tell you that the screens, the way that they're set up, particularly for children who get to play games on them, is that they create a chemical response that provides dopamine to the brain, which is our feel-good, happy chemical in our bodies. So when we have a computer that's delivering this chemical reaction for us, it's very hard to then get that same dopamine from a hug, or from finishing a page in a book, or lunch with a friend. And so we are always seeking that really strong dopamine hit of screen time. So we're going to tell you some ideas with the knowledge that this is very hard. If you're going to try to scale back on screen time, we're with you in spirit, but it's going to be hard.
And I also think it's like all these questions really they're so woven together. So again, we would say that if you track children's will forces and motivation and ability to persevere over the last 40 years or however many years since screens have become more predominant in our lives, I'm quite sure it's connected. So, that's a big reason children lack motivation, is because they get everything so quick and satisfying through the screen. So knowing all that and knowing what Rebecca's saying, it's not easy to get your children off screens, but I think we might just at first state what the ideal would be. You know, the ideal scenario is that your children aren't using screens during the school week.
That's ideal.
That would be ideal, because then, and let's say it is like, I don't know if I can say this, it's like,
you can say whatever you want.
It's like crack, right? Like if you're getting, or any intense addiction, your child's going to be grumpy and angry and moody and uncomfortable as they're coming off of this addiction. But if you can tough it out for 3 weeks, you will see a different child who starts to love learning for the sake of learning and sinks into the joy of things that are slower paced and take more time. Like, it will happen.
And it's certainly, you know, I remember reading an article about how young children particularly, they don't have the intellectual capacity to even understand how a computer works. And so we might consider the tools that we provide for our children should match their capacities to intelligently understand how a tool works. So when we give them a spinning wheel, they can understand how the wheel spins and how the pedal makes the cog underneath the wheel spin, and everything works together, and out comes the carded wool. Whereas to understand how a computer works doesn't quite, for a young child, doesn't work yet. So even that distance between themselves and the tool that they're using is a bit, it's a bit foreign for them. So in a perfect world, these things would be held back until high school or so. And yet here we are.
Right. And so in a less than perfect world, if you could imagine not using screens during the school week, and then it's a treat that Friday after school they get to watch a show or play on their iPad, and that happens on the weekend, and then you get back into your school routine, over time you would see a lot of changes in your children's behavior, and you could start bringing in more of those activities that build the will forces, like the joy of getting a piece of beeswax and modeling it and taking that time could become more nourishing and more engaging than it might have been before. Yeah. So I think it's kind of like when I've thought, okay, I have to quit coffee, and there's just a huge amount of resistance because I don't want to, but I know it's better for me. And I'm sure some of you right now are like, oh God, the resistance, the thought of taking them off the screen means I'm going to have to be parenting more often, and it's going to get crazy, and they're going to be whining and complaining and moaning. Yes, to a degree, yes, for a short period of time, but then they will be easier to manage. It will be easier to parent them because they'll become used to what's expected, and they won't be able to whine and get what they want, and you won't feel the stress and the guilt every time they're like, oh, can I just get it now? Oh, can I do that? Because it's so addictive.
I mean, I just have to say a word too. It's hopeless to think that we can support our children to lower their dependency on screens if we ourselves are not making that same change or step in our own lives. So it's hard, but it does pay off. I think it does pay off.
So the next topic is how to support your atypical learners.
So this is, a lot of homeschooling parents have multiple children, and everybody learns differently. And sometimes there's some exceptionalities that come into play with different learning styles or different supportive needs. And so we've had questions about how much support do I give my child, or how much do I hold back and insist on perseverance, or the child developing their own skills, and knowing where that threshold is in these kinds of questions.
So we were saying things like, you want to offer them the support that they clearly need. I'll use writing as an example again. Let's say writing is extremely fatiguing and challenging, and there's a ton of resistance. So at first, they are verbally giving you the information, and you're their scribe, and you're writing it down for them. And then as soon as you see that they're ready to write one sentence by themselves, then you take that little step back. They write one sentence, you write 3, and slowly you step back and they step forward. And our suggestion was that once you've seen that they can write one sentence alone, don't go back to writing the whole thing for them. Rather, if they're having a very difficult day and they cannot write that one sentence, then you would say, okay, it looks like today is a day we take a break, and you can come back to this writing tomorrow. So that's how we would approach how
And
to
so
support them.
if you're just starting to kind of assess and notice that your child really cannot handle writing a paragraph, you might start, again, set the bar low so that your child can feel successful with every step they take. So your child you'll write the whole thing and your child will write over top of 1/3 of the paragraph. That's your starting place. And then you're building from this low bar, you're building up, but you know where you're going, which is that your child does the whole paragraph. So you're imagining ahead of time these incremental steps, and you are going to resist backsliding and know to take a break if it's a day that you need to take a break.
Yeah. It's knowing your child, knowing what they're capable of, and then making space for difficult days and just seeing the big positive picture of where you're heading.
Yeah, the key is to notice those positive things because every person has a gift of some sort. So your child who really struggles with reading is going to have a gift in some other area. So this is the thing to play up. So it's, you want the child to maintain their confidence and their self-esteem. So focusing on those positive things is really key for you too as parents. Yeah.
So the next topic is signs, how to notice the signs of overwhelm in your child.
Sometimes they're pretty obvious.
It might be that they're, just slumping over in their desk, they're sliding off their chair, their eyes are glazing over. Sometimes they might just say that they're bored.
They keep changing the subject whenever you're about to dive into the next thing. They change the subject and talk about lunch at grandma's or talk about the dog, things like this. They're just distracted and not engaged and slumpy.
So sometimes that's just happening on that particular day or just in a brief moment. So you could get up and have this body break where they're doing some sort of physical activity or there's some sort of brain game they like to do. Something that is still nourishing them and supportive but playful and feels like a game or a break is a perfect idea. You could be throwing and catching a ball or find out how many times can you bounce the ball and catch it without dropping it, little challenges.
Adding those little challenges.
Yeah, those are always fun. But sometimes it might be that you see those behaviors and they're just dragging out over a longer period of time. That might be a sign that your routine needs to be refreshed. Every great routine only lasts. Let me rephrase this. We always say how important rhythm and routine is. So the big structure, like the bookends and some of those really big pieces in your day are key pieces of structure that you don't want to change. But within that, there are smaller routines that last maybe for 4 to 6 weeks, they're great. And then you notice something needs to change. So that might be a sign that your children are just getting fidgety and overwhelmed because it's maybe too much of one type of activity or too much of the same song or too much of some sort of aspect of the lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just observing and being, kind of understanding that, everything works for a time and then needs subtle adjustments or bigger adjustments. And you just kind of rework it as you go along.
I had this experience today where I was working with a child who was a little bit distracted and not so engaged in the subject we were focused on, and she wanted to focus on the dog instead. So I took the subject of her dog and used it to guide us back by talking about what the dog was doing and which words are the nouns and which are the verbs and what does the name start with and these kinds of things, and just redirected it back around. And sometimes that works. And it's just being full of energy and creative as the parent leading that and redirecting that.
And I think sometimes kids are, they get too silly or resistant. Another suggestion we had was, you might use the same verse that you've been using for a while in a circle, but you're suddenly saying it in different voices, like you're just a big giant and you're thumping, or you're the tiny little mouse and you're squeaking it, or you're saying it as fast as you can or slow. So you can get very creative with the same material and have them, I used to do that with my grade 1 class. Now let's say the verse, we were gnomes marching around, and sometimes the gnomes were grumpy and they were shouting the verse and they thought that was hilarious. And sometimes they were crying the verse and laughing the verse. So that makes it more engaging and interesting if you feel like you've exhausted kind of the basics of your material.
Yeah. And our final topic that we wanted to address was about how behavior can sometimes change as the season changes.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of these topics are related to each other and addressing some things that are overlapping here, but spring is a really big one.
Yeah, it absolutely
People
is.
really notice it. It's such a shift from that winter energy of tea and quiet reading. You know, you enter spring and something just happens to the body, doesn't it?
It's the same feeling of like flowers are blooming and animals are coming out of hibernation, and the energy, kids are so susceptible, they're so in tune with energy, and they're like little sponges, and they're just kind of bouncing with the excitement of spring. So it's legitimately a thing. Like as teachers, we would always feel like, whoa, like suddenly the class is kind of vibrating at a higher energy, and you just have to get outside more. You have to get more active activities. You need to be in the garden. You need to be engaging with the season, because that's very satisfying. So there's no question, as a teacher, homeschooling parent, you know, there's the excitement and the focus of September, like we're ready to start. And then there's this descent into the darkness of winter. And it is very focused and it's cozy, and you can, you know, sit for longer periods of time. And then spring comes and everything gets bouncy. And there's an anticipation as we get closer to summer that we're just ready to throw everything out the window and just get outside and play. So it's that fine balance of like, we still have work to do, but we can lighten the load. We can be outside more, but we have goals we're still trying to achieve. So how do you do that in a playful way that's still accountable and responsible?
Yeah. You can think of it like the seeds are underground in the winter, and in the spring, they have to burst from those little brown coats, and the shoot is going to come up to the ground. And we wouldn't want to smother that or bend it or push it back into its brown bulb. We would want to like remove the obstacles and give it space to shoot up and grow. It's just the same with the children in spring. So we want to change up the activities and give lots of room for movement and development and growth, and celebrate those. They've already likely been in school since September. So celebrating all of those accomplishments along the way and looking back and getting some enthusiasm for jumping ahead into new things.
Yeah, like taking the advantage of this time for field trips is really good. And often this is the time of year when plays are done in a classroom. So you might find ways to do a little mini play if you have a few children, or create a monologue and your child gets to act out a character. Like that's really enlivening and really fun. Yeah, you can make puppets or...
I mean, a lot of our lesson plans for the springtime were based on our own experience in this hemisphere. And so a lot of them have incorporated these ideas of being outside at this season. So, you know, finding ways to extend that past the morning lesson as well, and providing lots of opportunities for outdoor play and experiences, widening experiences.
Yeah, that's right.
So a lot of those overlap, and a lot of those support each other. As you make changes for the season, you might address burnout. You might address the child who needs to learn differently by going outside. You might, you know, the spring brings so much warmth for playing outside. The screen time might just decrease naturally and things like this. But we wanted to take the time to address each of your wonderful questions. And thank you for placing them on the Facebook page. That was helpful.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We hope this helps. Bye.
Bye.